Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Good Life for Nebraska Seniors. I'm your host, Donna Blum, with Graceful Senior Transitions. And this show, if this is your first time tuning in, this show is for seniors and their families. And we want to provide information, valuable resources, and uplifting conversations that are going to help seniors have a happy, healthy, and purposeful basically golden year period. So today I'm so excited to welcome my friend and guest, Andrew Sigerson with Legacy Design Strategies. Welcome, Andrew. I'm so glad to see you again.
It's my pleasure to be here. Looking forward to it.
Well, I'm looking forward to it too. So really, to get us started though, it might be helpful for our audience to know a little bit more about you and your journey. How did you become an estate planner?
Yeah, well, I've been an attorney for about 25, almost 30 years now, and I did a lot of litigation when I started, and I was really in the middle of conflict all the time, and that wasn't enjoyable, and it got really old really fast.
I'm not surprised.
That's right. And so I decided, I needed to make a transition into an area where it was fulfilling, and working with families is such an incredible career path. And so estate planning is really just about working with families and learning their stories and helping them achieve their goals, and that's what I get to do every day. And it's really great. And so I tell people most law is adversarial, but we practice happy law. And happy law. That's right.
I do like that. So often when you think about law, it's because there's been an accident and you're going after somebody for money, or it's a divorce.
That's right.
Or some unpleasant set of circumstances, right? But this is happy. This is like,
that's right.
I love the name of your business, Legacy.
Legacy, yep. It's all about, I tell people an estate plan is your last instruction manual to your family. And so you're telling them a little bit about your background, your history, your legacy, and what you want to leave. And so just helping people think through that process and then getting it down in a way where they can communicate that to their family long term is really fulfilling.
Yeah. I've heard it said, I'm sure most people have heard it said, that you never see a hearse pulling a U-Haul, right? You can't take it with you, but you've worked your whole life, you've amassed wealth or assets, and this is really an opportunity for people to decide, how it's going to impact future generations or how it might impact the community, right?
That's right, and we're in the middle of really the largest wealth transfer in the history of mankind right now. It's really hard to imagine what the numbers really are, but in the United States over the next roughly 25 years, we're going to transfer, Americans are going to transfer $124 trillion.
Oh my goodness.
And trillion is 1,000 billion. And so it's really hard to even fathom that number in your mind. But that's what's starting to happen as the greatest generation is mostly gone now. Baby boomers are now passing on that wealth to Gen X and the millennials and on. And so we just have this massive transfer happening, and so there's a lot of opportunity to do really good things with that, and to not only set up your family long-term, generationally if you want to, but also impact your community charitably, etc. People don't know this, but Omaha is so charitable. It's incredible how charitable this community is. Obviously, we've got Berkshire Hathaway, and we've got ConAgra, and we've got Mutual of Omaha. So there's a lot of wealth inside of there, but a lot of really wealthy people have set up a lot of foundations. Foundations have to give away money. It's not a choice. The law requires them to give away money every year. So as you see all these kind of big buildings and community centers and art centers get opened, it's because the really wealthy folks are trying to impact their community, and that's benefiting Omaha so dramatically. So it's a wonderful place to be.
It benefits everyone that lives in our community.
That's right.
Right?
It's awesome.
Well, you kind of touched on this a little bit. So they actually call this the Great Wealth Transfer, right? We're hearing a lot more about it now.
Right.
It's getting a lot of attention. What does it actually mean to Nebraskan families? And what should seniors start thinking about today?
Yeah, when you think about estate planning, and to be fair, most people don't really start thinking about it until they're starting to hit their retirement years. I mean, young people should think about it because they might have kids and they should name someone to take care of those kids if something happens. But most people don't start thinking about it till they hit retirement. And that's usually when people start to think about, well, geez, what if I become disabled? Or, man, I've been dealing with my parents and it was stressful and it was a struggle and I couldn't get access to information. And so just having some of those basic documents almost in place so that you don't get frustrated or have to hire a lawyer to have to go to court, or you think about if my mom or my dad starts to become disabled and they need help, If I don't have a piece of paper that lets me help them, I'm going to spend thousands of dollars on a lawyer. And I'm going to have to literally sue my mom and have a doctor declare her disabled so that the court can give me power to go do things. Well, that all can be solved very quickly if you just sit down and have a conversation with an attorney and draft a power of attorney. And that solves so many problems so fast, and just eliminates a lot of heartache and frustration, and so even the basic discussion around estate planning can make a huge difference in the quality of your life and the happiness of your life.
Yes. There is certainly a more graceful approach, right?
Right.
So in some ways, our businesses kind of have a similar goal in mind, and that is to smooth it out, right?
That's right.
Mine's more about real estate transitions. What do you do with the family home when the senior has to move, or they want to age in place, or those kinds of things. But conversations need to happen early.
That's
and
right.
they can, and if you have a plan, things can just go so much more gracefully.
That's right. You have a plan whether you plan or not. The state has a plan if you don't have a plan, and that's not the plan you want.
No.
But you're performing such an important job, Donna, with your career and what you're doing here and just educating people. But the home is such a big asset.
It is.
And it usually has a lot of memories. And we don't want to be forced to have to deal with it in an emergency setting.
No.
And so, when you think about kind of the wealth and the transfer, there's almost a line. And what I mean by that is that there's a lot of folks in this country that don't have a lot, and there's a lot of folks in this country that have a lot. And both of those sets of folks need planning.
They do.
And so if you don't do good planning and you don't have a ton, you might lose it all to a nursing home. Well, how do we deal with that? How do we potentially address that issue and potentially save some assets for our family, like our home, which is usually in that net worth category, the biggest asset. It's their biggest asset.
Right.
And if you don't plan around it and you need a long-term care situation, you may lose everything you have. Versus the ultra or the more wealthy folks that don't have that problem. And now they're more worried about, what if my kids aren't good kids? What if my kids are struggling? What if my kids are bad with money? Those kinds of questions.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So a lot of people think that a will kind of covers all of this, right? Could you help to explain the key differences between a will and a trust, and when one might be appropriate over another?
Sure. What I really emphasize to folks when we visit with them is that we never come into an appointment with preconceived notions about what somebody should be doing. Everything you do around planning is goal driven. And so you just have to have a conversation about, all right, what are your goals? What's important to you? Who are we trying to impact? And then based on those answers, plus what you have, will determine what kind of document you use to do that. So wills aren't good or bad, they just are. And when you use a will, typically that requires at some point court. You pass away, that's called probate, and we have to go through court. Court's not good or bad, it's just different, right? And most people, when they hear court, they want to avoid it. So trusts avoid court if they're done properly. What's really critical to understand, though, is that setting up a piece of paper that says a trust doesn't help you avoid court. It also is about how you title your assets, how you manage who's going to be running that process, the tax ramifications around those things. And so dealing with someone that does it every day is really important. I know we're in the era of AI and people think they can do some of these things online. I would just really stress to folks, it's so goal driven. And you need someone to help you understand what are the goods and bads of those things. But wills and trusts, wills require court, trusts can avoid court. Wills don't generally do asset protection or tax planning. They're just kind of, I transfer my stuff. And trusts can do those things. I want to protect my surviving spouse. I want to give money to my kids, my grandkids, in a way where I can kind of direct and control how fast they might spend it or what they might use it for, at least until maybe they're mature enough to handle it, those kinds of things.
Put some of those controls in place. Yeah,
and I hate the word control because control sort of says I'm ruling from the grave, right? I'm gonna control what they're doing. But
thou shalt not.
That's right. That's right. But you talk to folks and they're like, if I told you when you're gone, you're going to give part of this to the government.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want the government to be a beneficiary? The answer is always no.
No.
Right? Or something happens to you and you give it to your child, and at the time you die, they're struggling with something. They're struggling with a family situation. They're struggling with an addiction. Don't you want to protect them from that? And you can. And that's more about what it's doing versus
protection
that's
versus
right.
control.
That's right.
I like that too.
Exactly.
That's much
Exactly.
better. You brought up something that spurred a question in my mind. So you talked about AI. Obviously, there's a lot of tools out there like
Right.
LegalZoom, and you can go online and
Right.
you can get a will, right?
Right.
You're not actually working specifically with a legal professional.
Right.
Any advice there?
Yeah, when you're dealing with these online systems, again, they're not good or bad. It's just they're designed to be able to work in all 50 states. They're not designed to have a conversation with you. They're not designed to understand the nuances of your relationships and your family and their situations. And so you're really just getting a piece of paper, and so it's very transactional. And most people, when you have a discussion about estate planning, it's a much more emotional, relational topic. They just don't know it is. So most of the time when people are doing it online, it's because they've been told, hey, I'm going out of town. I need to make sure if something happens to me that somebody can access my bank account or somebody can take care of my kid, right? But when you really sit down and have a conversation about how it impacts my family, then AI, at least now, can't do that very well.
Right, right. Well,
But it
that's
might
good.
be able to do it pretty well soon.
Maybe. It's definitely getting better,
Yeah,
but I like to think that it's never going to replace AI will never have the human element, right? And
right,
there's no substitute for that. Um, I really think that, especially in times like that, times of transition, and these are important decisions,
right.
that sitting down and talking with somebody you trust, that is like irreplaceable.
That's right. A lot of lawyers are trained in the law. What law schools could do a better job is training lawyers in the art of counseling. How do I build a relationship with someone and understand what's important to them?
Right.
Because that's really what estate planning is. What's important to you? What do you care about? And how do we make sure we leave that legacy when something happens to you? And that's why it's happy law, because you just learn so much about people. Everybody has a story. Every story is important, and it's fascinating to hear people's stories.
Oh, I love hearing people's stories.
Yeah.
Yeah. Happy stories.
Well, even the unhappy ones, because that shapes who you are, right?
That's right.
The struggles you have shapes who you are, and dumping a bunch of money on people when they're not ready for it is not a good story.
No, you're right. You're right. Or having somebody work so hard all their lifetime just to see all of their money go to the government.
Yep, the government, the nursing home,
Yep.
whatever you can imagine could happen can happen.
Right.
That's right.
Right. So, obviously, you've probably seen some families who have made some mistakes when it comes to estate planning. And how can they avoid the most common mistakes?
Yeah, I think a lot of folks, when they're doing estate planning and they're thinking about who's going to make decisions for me, who am I going to appoint to handle things for me, they kind of have this sense of, I need to make sure all my kids are involved. I need to make sure they all do it together. I need to make sure they don't feel left out. And what I try to emphasize is that when you're naming somebody as a healthcare person for you or as a financial person from you, it's really not about everybody should do it together. It's really about who's good at it. Because that's really what matters. Who's good at it. And if you do your planning properly, they're not going to be able to, take all your money and run without consequences. So I don't worry so much about that. So if I'm appointing one of my kids to be my healthcare power of attorney, and one of my kids is a nurse, and one of my kids is not a nurse, pick the nurse. The nurse understands the system. They're going to be an advocate. If I'm picking someone to pay my bills or manage my investments or file my taxes, pick the organized one, not the disorganized one. And if you have everybody do it together, that means they all have to agree. And it's there. Once kids understand, okay, what is mom and dad trying to have me help them do? They appreciate the fact that, they were looking out to make it as simple as possible without me and my siblings having to gather together to decide if we can sign a check, And so that's one of the mistakes people make. They're like, I need all my kids to do it together. Well, you really don't. Let's talk about what the job is and why it's important, and not make it harder than it should be. Because if you're trying to deal with a financial planning decision because you're disabled and we're trying to pay a bill and we need 3 people to sign off and they all live in 3 different states, that is really difficult.
Yeah, it would be.
Yeah.
Everybody has very busy lives and full schedules.
That's right.
And, finding a time that everybody can get together and talk through, even if they're doing it virtually, that even
Right.
can be a challenge to find a time that works for everybody.
Yeah, and everybody has different opinions, and not everybody has the same amount of information.
Right.
And so, yeah, it can be extremely frustrating.
And there could be conflict.
That's right.
Unfortunately.
That's right.
Which is a good segue to my next question, by the way. So, how can proper estate planning help reduce stress or conflict among family members after someone passes?
Yeah, this is a biggie. When you have mom and dad that are planning, so usually most of our seniors, their mom and dad, their grandma and grandpa, and if there's even going to be a hint that there's going to be potentially conflict, the best way we can address that is right up front. Right up front. So let's talk about what the issues are, what the problems are. Now, what the great thing about, for whatever reason, people open up to lawyers. So they might not open up to their friends, they might not open up to even to their counselors, but they'll open up to us. Say, yeah, this kid's got a problem, or this kid's struggling with this, or this kid has an addiction, or this kid's marriage is in trouble. You pick the problem, and that is conflict. So let's address it head on. And then what's really, I think, valuable, if you get through that process and you write a plan that's going to meet those goals, then let's have a family meeting and just talk about it. And let's talk about it before you die, because then we'll address it. And if anybody has a problem, they'll tell us and we can address it. But if we just bury it and then wait till you die, then we start spending all your inheritance on lawyers. And nobody wants to do that either. We don't want to give it to the government. We don't want to give it to lawyers.
So something that I just thought about too, sometimes perhaps the siblings all agree, but then you start getting, the suggestions or the opinions of spouses or in-laws or whatnot, and that just creates, there's more cooks in the kitchen, essentially.
Right.
Do you have any advice about that?
Yeah, if we think there's going to be undue influence from folks like that, that's part of what your planning is doing, is that you're saying, okay, when I leave assets to my kids, I'm going to leave it to them. I'm not leaving it to their spouse. And when they're gone, I'm leaving it to their children, their grandchildren. So they almost that bloodline sort of distribution level. Right. And I would say 99% of clients, that's what they do. And so most estate plans, and when I say most, I mean like 99%. When I die, I leave an outright distribution to my kids. Well, that almost certainly eventually comes to marital asset, and then you have all those issues. So in estate planning, when we're talking about trust planning, we talk about, what if when I die, I could leave my assets to the people I care about, but I could leave it to them in a lockbox, and the only person that has the key to that lockbox is my beneficiary. And so now they get to decide how to manage it, how to spend it, but because it's in this trust, this lockbox, nobody else has influence over that box. And then when I'm gone, that box can then go to my kids, my grandkids, et cetera. So that is a big concept that once people are educated about that, they do it. Because they're like, yeah, I don't know if my kid's going to have a bad marriage. I don't know if my kid's going to be disabled. I don't know if my kid's going to have a financial issue. What if I could protect them from all those things? Well, they can. They just don't know they can. And AI is not telling them they can. And so we tell them how they can do that.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. So, if you think about an inheritance, for example, if it was just a generic will, assets are divided between husband and wife in a divorce in this state, pretty much 50-50. Yeah. So that could very well just become a marital asset that gets evenly distributed. And if that's not something that you want to have happen with your, either what you're inheriting, or, that could be some advice that you give to your elderly parent, or as a senior, you could set up the lockbox, right? So
yeah, and we not only do that for kids, we do that for spouses. And so almost universally, the number one goal for a married couple when one dies is to take care of the other. I want to take care of my spouse. That's the most important thing I can do, right? Which is wonderful. But what if you could also protect them? And so when we think about, all right, I pass away, my wife's name is Crystal, I leave it in to her. What if I could give it to her where if she ever got remarried, it's protected? What if I could give it to her where if she ever started to lose her mind a little bit, then she gets that phone call from supposedly her grandson who's in jail in St. Louis, that call that people hear about in these days. What if we could protect it from that?
Yes.
And so that's what you can do in estate planning. You can also create a lockbox for your spouse. And you're not restricting your spouse. You're not saying they can't spend the money or invest the money. You're saying, hey, if somebody tries to sue you, somebody tries to take advantage of you, somebody remarries you, I'm going to protect from those things.
Yeah.
What a gift.
I like it. Again, we're back to protection, not control, right?
That's right. That's right.
Okay, so this next question, and we have about 7 minutes left.
Okay.
For seniors who already have a will or a trust in place, how often should they revisit or update that, especially when there's changing laws or changing family circumstances?
Yeah, one of the frustrating things about the legal profession is estate planning for most attorneys is a transaction. So I'm going to help you get your document done, and then I'll see you when you die. That's almost the kind of theory. So there's no updating, there's no thoughts, but this is your family we're talking about. And so, when you look at your estate planning, so first statistics, 65% of all Americans don't have a plan at all. No will, no trust,
no will,
nothing.
No nothing.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. So the state's going to decide to do what they're going to do with it. Of those that have done a plan, anything, will or trust, how long do you think it is between the time they do it till the time they look at it again? What's your guess?
20 years.
That's actually about right.
Is
That's
it
about
okay?
right. So what changes in 20 years, Donna?
You have children and they graduate and they grow up and they get
married. My life changes, my family changes. Hopefully the lawyer got smarter. All these things happen over those 20 years. And so at least in our law firm, in our process, we do an estate plan, and then we have a maintenance program where we're trying to touch base every year. All right, anything changed? Have you had any health issues? Have your kids done anything? Is there anything we need to deal with? Not to mention, okay, what laws have changed? And so when people do estate planning, the most important documents they probably have while they're living is their power of attorneys. Are their power of attorneys? Well, some institutions, banks, financial planning firms, etc., if that power of attorney is presented to them and it's older than 5 years, they won't take it.
5 years?
Yep.
Okay.
So if I walk in, my dad has a stroke, I walk into his financial advisor's office and he did that power of attorney 10 years ago, they may say, we don't take it, it's too old. You need your dad to sign another one. Well, my dad can't sign anymore. So now I'm going to court. So we tell people at least review your estate plan every 5 years. Update your powers of attorneys every 5 years. Now, on top of that, you've got changing laws, and it just depends on everybody's situation. How your retirement plan passes to your children, those laws have changed in the last few years. Inheritance tax in Nebraska, those laws have changed. They change pretty regularly. Our country keeps creating new asset classes. And so, 5 years ago, nobody had heard of Bitcoin. Well, if you get some Bitcoin, we need a paragraph about it. And what about social media? If I'm disabled and I've been running a Facebook account, what happens to that? And how do I stop that or whatever? So all those things kind of crop in. Or people, their whole life changes. Maybe they got remarried. Maybe their kid became disabled. So all those things matter. So you want to, when you're doing this kind of planning, you want to work with people that do it all the time. Another one of my frustrations about the legal profession, if you go to your doctor, all right, so you go to your regular doctor, and your doctor says, I notice you've got maybe some cancer here. Does your regular doctor do that? No, they refer you to
a cancer
specialist.
Yeah.
You know what lawyers do? They do everything. Oh, I can find that form. I'll create that will. I'll do that, even though I don't do it ever. I'm going to do it now. No, use a specialist. Use somebody who does it every day.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because you know the questions to ask.
That's right.
You know where the pitfalls are.
Right.
You know how to avoid future confusion or obstacles. So,
that's right.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so if someone's just getting started, okay, they're in that percentage. They have no will, they have no trust.
Or it's really old.
Or it's really old.
Right.
Perhaps they're feeling overwhelmed. They're concerned about how much this is going to cost them. What are some just first practical steps that they should take to begin building an estate plan that protects their legacy and their family?
Yeah, when we built our law firm 20 years ago, that was one of the things we thought about was what stops people from going to see lawyers? Well, it's stuffy, it's expensive, it's intimidating. All right, so how can we build a process that kind of takes away those things? So what we emphasize to people is that one of the things we generally need to know is you need to know who your family is. Well, most people know that off the top of their head. to a general idea of what they own. They don't have to have all the specific details, but just generally, what do I have? I have a house, I have a retirement plan, I have a bank account. Well, that's usually something you know, right? And then build a system where it's just a conversation and it doesn't cost anything. So just come in and talk about it, and we will have an hour-long discussion and learn about you and learn about your family and learn about your stuff and learn about what's important to you, and then educate you on what your options are, and then tell you at the end what it's going to cost. Flat fee, no hourly, no charge for phone calls, no charge for emails. Just try to make it as easy as we can. And that seems to work. I mean, that allows people to just come into a place where it's not intimidating and just have a discussion.
Yeah. I like that. If anybody has worked with an attorney, let's say they have a minimum charge.
Right.
So if they send an email, their minimum charge is, let's say, a half an hour. The
Right.
email might have taken 5 minutes to send, but they charge for a full half an hour. And that does create a lot of anxiety.
Heck yeah.
Because there's hidden expenses, right? So you're saying it's basically, you know up front what you're going to pay. If you have to reach out with a question, you're going to get an answer and you're not going to get a bill.
That's right. Yeah.
So that does take a lot of the anxiety when it comes to getting
Right.
started.
Estate planning is a relationship, and if I'm going to charge you every time you call me, you're not going to have, we don't have a relationship.
I'm not going to call you.
That's right.
I'm going to avoid calling
That's right.
you. I'm only going
That's
to
right.
call you if I absolutely need to talk to you, if I'm going to get charged for a half an hour.
Right? Yeah. And in trust planning, it's really important how your assets are titled.
Right.
Well, if your financial advisor calls the attorney to ask about that and they get billed for it, they're not going to do that either. So then we spend a bunch of money on a trust and it's not going to work. And so, yeah, you build this relationship with folks and they know they can call anytime they have questions. Their advisors can call. It's a team approach. Yeah, it is an experience people don't think they can get from lawyers. They can.
They can.
Yep.
Yeah. I guess I was just thinking, if you're looking for a doctor, not all doctors have the same
Right.
approach, right?
Right.
Same goes for an attorney. It's not a one size fits all. Find somebody that you trust, somebody that's going to really represent you well and care about you, your
Right.
future, your family, your goals.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So-
Exactly right.
Well, thank you so much, everybody, for watching today.
Our time's up?
Our time is up. Can you believe that? It
Can't
went
believe
so
it.
fast. Thank you for watching, everybody. Tune in next time. Have a blessed day. Bye now.